Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm Judi Glova. Today is day 3 of the Burnout Solutions series, and I've collected some of the best experts for you to teach you about how to have your own burnout solution. So I'm so excited because today is all about authenticity. Stop proving your worth and own your value to be seen, heard, and respected. And I want to remind you that we're going to be meeting every day throughout this online series in our Facebook group called the More Than Enough Women Circle. I will be live in the evening, so don't miss this daily recap and highlights. Plus, I'm going to be there to answer any of your questions. I want to make sure that you can take action on the tools and skills that you've learned each day. So if you haven't already, head on over to the More Than Enough Women Circle. So let's kick things off with Dana Middleton. But before we do, let me give you a little bit of background about Dana. Dana is the CEO of Insara, the industry-leading independent brand-to-local agency. She has a diverse history in the marketing industry that includes experience in the client, agency, and publisher organizations. Prior to joining Insara, Dana has worked as a leadership coach and headed up B2B marketing at Twitter and pioneered social media marketing at Moxie. Her most recent book is Grace Meets Grit: How to Bring Out the Remarkable, Courageous Leader Within. And it's designed to drive actionable behavior change for women and men in the workplace and new conversation around gender. So Dana, I just love what you do, and I also want to highlight the fact that our talk today is really going to be focusing on embracing power through authenticity. So, Dana, hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you, Judi? Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, I'm great, and I'm so glad to have you here. Just so everybody knows, Dana and I have known each other for a little over a year or so, and I just adore the work that you do, and it's so amazing how this topic and your book just match so beautifully, because we are going to be talking a lot about authenticity and gender differences and all of that great information. So I just want to dive right into our first question, which is, you know, when you look at how much burnout and overwhelm is in, you know, our normal discourse of conversation, like, why do you think there's such an epidemic of burnout and overwhelm these days?
Well, I think one of the big reasons is because we're always on, right? We never, ever, ever get away from work. In fact, one of the things that I work really hard to do is at least one day during the weekend is just walk away from all devices, because I've got this device on my wrist that pings me every time I get an email and a text. And I've got work email, I've got email, we have personal email, I have social media. And so I think we're just so programmed that our brains honestly are not wired for this. And we need the time to actually think and actually rejuvenate ourselves, you know, commit to building the energy back into our own bodies in ways that social media and online technology just does not feed, really.
Right. Yeah. And I think, you know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's kind of like we have to take the power, right?
Yes,
We have to.
That's
So
exactly right.
So talk a little bit about personal power and how, you know, we do have that choice, right?
Absolutely. In fact, one of the big frustrations that I see, particularly with young women who are really put so much pressure on themselves about keeping everything balanced, and this whole notion of balance that actually has been around since the 1970s is a misnomer, because that implies that everything's equal all the time. And quite frankly, it's just not possible to keep everything equal in our lives all the time. And so what I've been really talking about lately is let's change that word from balance to centered and think about it coming from within. And to your point, you're making the choice. So if you have a centered approach, then you're choosing to work longer that day, which might mean that home is sacrificed. Or conversely, you might choose, if you have a sick child, gosh, I've got to choose to be there today because that's the most important choice. But the whole point is you are in control. you're making the choice, you're making the trade-off. And quite frankly, as many young women say, how did you do it? And, how did you keep everything balanced? I didn't. I don't. Right? I'm making trade-offs every day. But the point is, I'm making those choices and I feel, sometimes better about them than others. But the point is I'm in control. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. And that's, honestly, the one reason why I really, really wanted you on this series is because you can come from that place of saying, I've raised kids. I've been a CEO. I've done these, I've had this expansive career with huge amounts of responsibility. And, coming from you, it really is being able to say that unique perspective of like, yeah, ladies, and I've been in your shoes, I've been on all sides of the desk and really understand what it is and what it takes. And
it's hard. It's hard to make those trade-offs sometimes. And you shouldn't beat up yourself thinking it's going to be easy because it isn't.
Right. Right. And I love also the fact that there's two words that you brought up that I thought were, well, three actually. Centered, right? Because when you come from a place of centeredness, right, it doesn't mean it kind of means balance, but it doesn't. There's like a deeper inner sense of being centered within yourself. And then the other part is control, which I think I always put control in air quotes because I'm a recovering control freak.
Yes, aren't we all?
Yeah. And I have that illusion that I'm in control and I'm driving the bus and somehow I'm making the world turn, but actually I'm not.
Yeah.
But yeah, we do need to have at least a sense of control. And I think we can connect that in a healthy way to choices. We can have control of the choices that we make and make it okay that we make these choices. I think where we get so locked up and we get off center is when we don't make our choices okay. We actually judge our choices. Would you agree?
Or we don't make a decision. So I think the antidote to you really making yourself have control and feeling like you are moving toward a solution is the antithesis of paralysis, right? So if you're stuck in this paralyzed and you can't move, I was recently working with a great sports psychology coach, and she was talking about the difference between athletes. And obviously they have amazing bodies and can do incredible things, but really the incrementalism mentality of an athlete is what makes the best athletes the most successful, because they just do one step forward at a time. And just remember that incrementalism adds up. And I think that's so true for life. So if you really want control and you want to be centered, take the choice, take the action, know that even a baby step forward, and it might be a wrong step, it doesn't matter, because you can fix that. Just keep moving forward.
Yes. And I think I would even dovetail off of that and having that incremental one, like that focus, right? I mean, we have so many things that can distract us. Yeah. So part of it is having focus, having commitment and dedication. But the other thing that I also picked up on is, when you're in paralysis, decisions are made in default, right? Because if you don't make a decision is made for you.
That's right. And so if you want to be in control and you want to go have it from a centered place, better you to make that choice. And like I say, sometimes it's between a bad and a worse choice, right? It isn't always a good choice, but it's a choice nevertheless. And you're right. I have my daughter called me recently. I'm a grandmother now to 4. Yay! And she has 2 little ones. And she's like, how did you survive motherhood? And I'm like, just one day at a time, one step at a time, one progression at a time. I don't know how I did it. I just did it.
Right. Well, and again, I think that's very sage advice, for your daughter and for all of our listeners who are moms and, working, because sometimes it is just one day at a time. You don't need to get so far ahead of yourself. And the more present you are, the more you're, the more choice, the more conscious choices you can make and really feel good about those choices.
Yeah. And I think present is a great word, because as you talked about the fact that we're always on, and especially always technology stimulated, it's impossible for you to truly be present if you have all those distractions. So taking the time, I can remember back in the days when I could actually step outside my door and go ski, cross country ski for an hour at lunch. The things that I would think about, I never would have thought about while I was sitting at my desk, right? And so we are so programmed, I think, to work through lunch and get as many hours as we can and be productive as possible. But really, there's value in clearing that space and being able to think about things openly. And, that's really important.
Oh gosh, I want to reiterate that key nugget point there because you can get so much done outside of your office alone. Like I would say there's 2 times in my life or I should say 2 activities that when I'm doing them besides meditation, that really, for some reason, I just get great ideas. One is when I'm moving my body, like whether I'm at the gym and I'm on the elliptical machine or running outside with my dog. So that's my new thing. I figured I'm going to do 2 things at once. I'm going to run my puppy and I'm going to get at least 20 minutes of exercise every day. But my mind, it's like I can clear think so much better when I have time to just like rhythmically be in my body. And then the other time I have to say is when I'm driving, I come up with the most creative ideas when I'm in the car. I don't know why. I think it's because I am focused on something, but somehow my unconscious mind, I think, is kicking in or whatever. But anyway, those are potential tips for people of just like think about how you can create that quiet time for yourself. And that's the other thing. I turn off the radio when I'm driving. I try to drive
without NPR or something. Yes.
Yeah, I know. So I have to make choices, right?
Yep, of course.
Absolutely. So let me tell me a little bit about, authenticity and owning our inner authenticity. Like what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of research. When I did the research for my book, there was a lot of research related to leadership styles, and especially because, as you know, my whole thesis is around the fact that because men are largely in charge, the male leadership style and approach is what everyone models after. And whether it's active or it could be even subconscious as a leader, even if you're not a male, you're being judged against that style. But all of the research shows that women that try to model that male leadership style, which is generally not necessarily an authentic style for them, don't do very well. They actually are not functioning leaders very well, and they're not thought of as effective leaders. And so it's really important to really draw on your own authenticity and be the leader and the person that you really believe in, not what you think someone is supposed to behave or how they're supposed to be a leader. And so that whole authenticity, especially as it relates to power. So power is this interesting dynamic that I think is somewhat difficult for women because there's also a fair amount of research that shows that we have this ambiguous relationship with power. We tend to think of it in its coercive form versus its empowering form. And as collaborative leaders naturally, and there's a lot of research that shows that women have a much more inclusive collaborative style, that we kind of choose not to embrace that power. And yet thinking about the fact that any leader needs to embrace their power in order to harness the influence potential of the organization. And so doing that in an authentic way, which means including others, which means collaboration, that's all things that you should be really proud of and actually is very effective from a leadership standpoint.
Absolutely. So I really want to dovetail on what you're saying because, as women, who are our role models but men, right, in the workplace, whether it was our fathers or other bosses, right? So we thought that, that's how we needed to be. But then it seems as though what you're saying is that the research shows, but we're not actually seen as being authentically powerful in that way. And we're actually not embracing our true power, which is in the collaboration. Because, even when I look at, the 3 outcomes of leadership that, I teach when I'm working for the Center for Creative Leadership, the 3 outcomes when we know good leadership is happening is direction, alignment, and commitment. And how do we get alignment? You have to be inclusive.
Exactly.
And even how do you set good direction? You have to include other people because Oh my gosh, I don't know about you, but when I have somebody telling me what I have to do and I don't have a say, I'm not exactly like excited about
Right.
it.
You actually aren't empowered and don't feel empowered. And it's interesting that you say that. So decisiveness, or the act of making decisions, is in fact the most biased leadership behavior. So in fact, people believe that if you make quick decisions, and so therefore you're very decisive, which might imply that you aren't including others, because obviously the more people you include in a decision, the longer that decision process might take. But as it turns out, that is the behavior that judges most people on whether they're a good leader or not, is this whole decisiveness quality. And women definitely try to involve others. They have a much more collaborative leadership approach. They will sacrifice the timeline in order to include others in the process. And that may or may not fit the criteria of a quick and immediate action, decisive definition, even though it isn't written down anywhere, right? We don't, how do we know that that's the right or wrong way of making a decision? We don't. And probably, as I hypothesize in my book, there's probably situations where making a quick, decisive decision that isn't involved in others is important. And there are other times when involving many in the decision-making process is important. It's not a right or wrong approach, but we should have a much broader definition and not judge simply based on the speed to decision.
I agree 110%. And what you were talking about, I was visualizing when I was teaching a lot more often emotional intelligence development. There is an emotional intelligence decision-making wheel. And they talk about how, what's the problem? Who are you including? Like there's actually a place there. And then the other question is, how much time do you have to make the decision?
Exactly.
So it really is relative, because as leaders, you have to make good quality decisions. But it's like, what are the facts that you have? Who are you including? And how much time do you have to make the decision? Because the more stakeholders that you can include, the theory is that the quality of the decision is better and you have more buy-in.
Right.
But to your point of like, if the timeline is the timeline, I mean, sometimes we are forced to ask less people to be involved in it. But if you just go with pure logic alone, if this, then that, and you're not including the human element and opinions, they've shown that, the quality of the decisions, because we are filters. We're constantly filtering what data we select and what we think is important data and how many, data points that we have. So fantastic.
And as it relates to collaboration, I think Harvard did a study that showed that only 3% of the population of organizations are collaborators, and the majority of those are women. But you look at the importance of collaboration today. So we don't talk a lot about that, or the skill of it, or even teach collaboration skills. For example, we teach leadership skills. We teach people how to be decisive. But how do we teach people to be better collaborators? Because it's truly a skill that's required today, no matter where you're working, small business, medium business, large business. Even if you're coaching a team, collaboration is important. And I would, again, dovetail on that. And so much of the reasons why we get promoted in the corporate world, or even, recognized by, clients and whatnot, is that, being that lone ranger, right? We get promoted for being a lone ranger, and then we don't get promoted, or we don't get original, in the beginning, we're not necessarily rewarded for that collaboration. It's like, do it yourself, show that you're a go-getter and that you're a smart person or whatever. So I totally hear what you're saying. And I would even say, I love the word collaboration. I also like the word facilitation. Yes,
because
absolutely.
to me, it's like, how do you facilitate the leadership? How do you facilitate other people to help get things done? Because it's an important skill. And I see some of the best leaders that are really great facilitators.
It's so true. As a certified facilitator, I can tell you I did not appreciate that until taking the class and truly understanding the difference between teaching and facilitating. It's a big difference.
Okay. What would you say the difference was in terms of teaching and facilitating?
Teaching is telling us certain people a certain way.
Right.
Facilitating is helping a group determine what that way is. You don't come with an opinion. You're just helping make sure that everyone is heard and that the way is documented and they're making progress. But it's really not about a specific set of topics or a specific way in doing things, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Very
And then
different.
that frees us up as women to be leaders and not have to know it all. I think that's the other pressure that I used to face, especially in corporate, and even now today with, with dealing with clients, that are corporate clients and whatnot. And it's like, there's sometimes I feel like I need to know all the answers. And then, you know what, if I facilitate a really good discussion, I don't need to be the one that knows it all. I can get the information if I ask really, really good questions.
Yes.
So I love that. So tell me, I think we've touched on, I think you mentioned that one of the power styles are coercion versus empowering, or the collaborative style. Are there other types of power styles?
Sure. There are a number of ways you can hold power. You don't have to have, there's positional power, meaning I'm a CEO, therefore I have positional power just by the fact that I'm the most senior person here. But you can also have power because you have the most information or the most education about something. I think we generally feel coercive power. Unfortunately, that's the thing we're most familiar with, because it's like, if you do this, I'll give you this kind of coercive approach. But obviously, empowering others, which it really involves helping others learn along the way and giving them the tools in order to drive toward that solution, and empowering them, is the most effective way in any organization or any team to provide power to someone. And again, we don't generally think of that. We think of the negative side of power often, but there's a number of ways that you can hold power. It's not just about having positional power or having a coercive approach over others.
Exactly. Okay. So tell me this, how can women leverage a lot? I mean, because obviously you did so much research for your book. It's like, how can women best leverage how they show up in the workplace so that they are authentic and powerful, and making sure that they're using the right, their skills that really matter?
So I think the first and best way is to really embrace power and understand that it's important, whether you're in a position of power or not, to be an effective leader, embracing that power, because what you're doing by embracing it is that you're realizing the influence potential of the organization. In order to really get and harness that full influence potential, you need to embrace it. And so I think that's the most important thing, is to recognize that it's a valuable skill. It doesn't have to be negative. It can totally be about empowering others, which definitely feeds our soul, and do it in the way that's most authentic to you. Don't try to be someone else or to look at your role model and think, I'm going to be powerful like that. Embrace your own power ethos, if you will. So I've had others describe me as, and obviously I work in a young industry, so it says, you're like my friend's mom, but in a good way. So I guess that's my power skill, right?
That's your superpower, yeah.
Exactly. And,
you're nurturing. You're a nurturing CEO.
That's exactly right. I consider, my leadership kind of like gardening, which again, I would think that would be very nurturing, right? So I can't really dictate the culture. All I can do is sprinkle the seeds and the fertilizer, make sure that it has enough water, and nurture it along. And I think that's really important, to figure out the gifts that you bring to the table, and try to leverage those in the best way that you can. The other one for me is continuous learning. So I am not one of those people who knows everything. And in fact, I don't want to know everything. I want to continue to learn everything. And so leveraging that as a skill in terms of how can I leverage my continuous learning into being a better leader, and to really recognizing the influence potential of the organization.
Yeah. So with those 2 points too, when you talk about embracing power, I would also think that, a lot of people tend to get burned out because they don't use their voice. They actually don't speak up. So to me, is that part of embracing power, is like, being able to communicate effectively and owning the fact that your voice, especially if you're invited to sit at the table and they're, they want your opinion, that really, they want to hear what you have to say.
Yes, absolutely. And again, this sports psychology coach was so interesting. She was like, so slouch down and, say things over and over, like, I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to make a difference. And then change your posture and do it again and see what happens. And to your point, finding that, I mean, there are days when I think, I need to go back and change my clothes and put on something different. And it's almost like dressing the part in order to feel, because I have my own self-doubts and we all do. But coming to the table fully present and, to your point, fully enabled to communicate and contribute to your full extent, I think is really important, and not being shy about that.
Yes.
It took me a long time because I'm an introvert and I'm not always comfortable, and I wanted to have everything fully formed before that I could actually voice, what I had to say. So it took me a long time to be comfortable with that.
Oh, you hit on such an important point, because I'm like an extrovert too. I recharge. I know a lot of people think that because I'm really expressive and like, oh, you're an extrovert. And I'm like, no, actually, I really like downtime. I like to recharge in silence. And I also like to think about what I'm going to say before I say it.
Yes.
So I really, really, really want to emphasize to the other introverts out there in the world that, even your style is okay, and take that time to think before you speak, because most of the time I have found that, at least in my leadership training programs that I do, it's that those introverts, they usually get the feedback that, you don't always speak up, but when you do, I always listen. So it's like, yeah, you actually have power that you don't even realize you have. And people really do listen when you speak, because when it comes out, it's not half-baked. It's really concise and really powerful. And then
they're good listeners. And so generally speaking, they've absorbed a lot of what's going on that the rest of the room might have missed. And so that is a really valuable skill as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think your other point about being a continuous learner, I think, is having that sense of curiosity, of like being curious. So when, we're talking to women that are burned out by their jobs and they're just feeling like, oh my gosh, there's so much going on. Maybe it's about getting curious about what are solutions. How can we be focused on either what's there as opposed to focusing on what's not there. That's one point of curiosity. But it's like, how can I involve even other people to help me get curious about how I can make a difference, or how I can shift this, or how I can solve this without doing it all myself?
Or feeding your soul a different way. So, how do I feed my soul over here? Even if I can't solve this problem over here, I'm going to nurture myself in a different way that actually might creatively feed back into that problem that you have. So recently I just worked with pottery. I hadn't been on the pottery wheel since I was 14 with a friend. And that was so great because, again, it was completely different than what I normally do, something I hadn't thought about in a long, long time. And it spurred so many other thoughts in different ways. And so just, thinking outside the box in a way that we get so focused on the problem, which is not all bad, but sometimes it just derails you.
Wow. And I can also say from my experience at the Potter's Wheel that, man, talk about learning about how to deal with stress.
It's so true.
You can be working on something and something goes, whoop, it's like you're not present and you're not focused, and it'll go like that, and your pot is just, it goes to pot.
It shows you the power of being centered, for sure. You've got to get that centered like right off the bat, or it's all over.
Well, and actually, I think there's so many metaphors about pottering because, pottery, because you do have to be centered right off the bat. You have to be centered and focused on the task, because otherwise it'll just go crazy afterwards. And it's having that sense of just enjoying what you're doing in the moment. So.
And not being afraid also to, it's all a grand experiment anyway. And so you're right. It might go to hell in a handbasket. And what are you going to do? You're just going to start over. It's just clay. So I think that's not a bad thing. It made me think about a lot of things, even after, you have to fire it twice. the margin for error in every step is pretty phenomenal, right? And
one little air bubble, and it's like nothing.
Exactly. So, yeah, just remember your pottery wheel.
Yes. And I just really want to connect the dot again to the theme of our talk today was all about embracing power through authenticity and really coming from who we are, because we'll have less stress, we'll have less burnout if we are truly tapping into our power, being authentically who we are, and being able to be inclusive and just use all those skills that are so within, they're more hardwired into us as women. And why don't we just use them, right?
Absolutely.
It just seems like, wouldn't that be so much easier?
And being comfortable with it, right? That you don't have to be that coercive, negative power that we have out there that, no one wants or is afraid to embrace. And so that's the most important thing.
Yeah. And oh gosh, you just reminded me of one other thing, because you were talking about the body language of I also read an article about, women doing presentations and going into the bathroom and doing a power pose.
Yes.
Right? The power pose is like the superwoman pose where you put your hands on your hips and you stand like superwoman.
Yep.
And it really does. It really gives you, a revitalized sense. And that can definitely help whenever we're in that corporate space, when we're feeling a little overwhelmed or a little bit scared, because this leadership and businesswoman, being a businesswoman today, it's not for sissies.
No, it's not.
Well, Dana, thank you so much. And I just want to ask you one last question. So what's the one thing that if our audience, our businesswomen, if they could walk away with one key thing, what do you think you would want them to walk away with?
Yes. Embrace that power. I mean, just feel it inside and, tilt your chin up and walk away with it. Take a breath, and everyone has it. I think there's this perception that only some people have power, and it's simply not the case. We all have it. It's tapping into that and leveraging it in a way that is authentic to you. So, breathe in, feel that centeredness, tilt that chin, and flaunt that power.
I love it. I love it. And I know you're going to be doing some public speaking, and I'm sure that's just like that helps get you in that power.
It does.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And Dana, again, thank you. I always love working with you and hearing about the amazing research and the book that you've written. And So everybody, not only am I thanking Dana, but I'm thanking you for being here as our audience. And don't forget that you can go down below and click the link for Dana's free gift. And also, if you've already purchased your Backstage Pass, you also get her bonus gift. And you know what? That's like a burnout solution in and of itself, because you don't have any worry, any stress, because you can download all the interviews all at once, and you can put them on your phone and listen to them whenever you want. But if you haven't purchased the Backstage Pass, you still have that opportunity to get, the amazing deal of just being able to access all of this worry-free. And you can just be able to get that inspiration when you need it most, right at your fingertips, right on your phone. So with my final point, I just want everybody to know that, and to think about, instead of burning the candle at both ends, let your light burn brightly, knowing that you are more than enough. Most importantly, you can create your own burnout solution, and you don't have to do it alone. So I'll see you on the next amazing interview, and I'll also see you today in our Facebook group for the recap and the Q&A. So I will see you then, and thanks again, Dana. See you soon.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.